Welcome back, beautiful tri-state area. You're listening to a moment of Zen right here on 710 WOR, the voice of New York, iHeartRadio. I'm your host, Zen Sams. Coming up in our disability awareness segment brought to you by OGPay.com. Today, we're featuring influencer, Sanfilippo Syndrome advocate and medical mama, Carrie Fowler. She's also an author. She's currently advocating for her daughter, Haidyn, who has been diagnosed with a terminal genetic disorder, Sanfilippo Syndrome. Now, with over 500,000 followers on social media, Carrie wants to give her daughter a voice and leave a legacy. She's here today to chat disability awareness, demystifying the stigmas surrounding Sanfilippo syndrome, and raise awareness for research and funding. Also called MPS, mucopolysaccharidosis type 3, Sanfilippo syndrome is a genetically inherited metabolic disorder that causes nervous system issues and a range of other symptoms in children. This syndrome is also sometimes referred to as childhood Alzheimer's because it ultimately causes the loss of physical and mental development over time. Researchers estimate fewer than 5,000 people in the United States have Sanfilippo syndrome. There is no cure yet, but doctors and researchers are working hard to find better treatments for it. Sanfilippo syndrome does affect life expectancy, although it varies. Most children reach only their teenage years, but some do live longer, into their 20s and 30s. Welcoming now to the show is the amazing Carrie Fowler. Welcome, Supermama.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for coming on. Wow, you have such a story to tell, my dear. So, I'm going to start from the beginning. So, I'm just going to educate our listeners here and viewers, but a family history increases the risk, which affects about 1 in 70,000 births. And kids who have the condition are born with it, but most won't have symptoms until the preschool years when they're between 2 and 6 years old. Then they start to show developmental delays and behavioral issues. Were you aware of this throughout your pregnancy? And when did Haidyn receive a formal diagnosis?
So, no, I had a completely normal pregnancy. I mean, as normal as it can be. Um, we did start to have an idea that Hayden had some delays between ages 2 to 3. She was actually first diagnosed with autism, sensory processing disorder, and global developmental delay at age 3. We received the correct diagnosis of Sanfilippo syndrome at age 5 as she continued to regress. So at age 3, we started early interventions and multiple therapies, and she continued to lose skills and abilities and speech. And she was very, very fearful of things that she didn't used to be afraid of. And so I started searching for more answers, and I was able to get a referral to genetics. Somehow, some way, I say it's mom intuition. I came across a lot about genetic testing, and I just pushed for testing. I didn't know what I was looking for, but um, through that, we were able to find out the correct diagnosis of Sanfilippo syndrome.
Wow, what a
Yeah.
journey. I mean, it often takes years, I know that, to receive a correct diagnosis of Sanfilippo because, of course, due to its rarity and lack of physician awareness, a child's symptoms, to your point, are often classified as developmental delay and or autism until, like you said, a thorough medical workup is done to identify the underlying issues. So good
Hmm.
job for pushing on that, Mama. Now, there are four types of Sanfilippo syndrome: A, B, C, and D. And type A is the most common and most severe. In most of the world, type A is the most common subtype, making up more than half of the cases.
Hmm.
Types B and C are less common, and type D is the rarest. So we know that type A is typically considered the most severe subtype. This means that most people with type A have a rapidly progressing form with earlier loss of abilities, such as talking and walking. What type does Haidyn have? And what were
Hayden,
some of her more telling symptoms? And when did they really start to ramp up?
Hayden does have type A, and I would consider her a very severe case for how progressed she is at only 8 years old, because she can no longer talk, she can no longer walk, she can eat very little by mouth, but is 99% tube fed. Um, and, she has just progressed really quickly to be only 8. Um, but Hayden lost all speech. I remember at 5 when she was diagnosed. and we first partnered with the Cure Sanfilippo Foundation. Glenn, which is one of the founders of the Cure Sanfilippo Foundation and also another Sanfilippo Syndrome parent, he said that their daughter lost all speech by age 6. And I remember thinking, like, there's no way I'm not going to hear her talking anymore in a year. I mean, she couldn't say as much as she once could, but she was still saying a bunch of words, even if they were all over the place. And by age 6, Haidyn no longer talked. I mean, for about another year, we would occasionally hear a word or what we thought was a word, every few months, but that was it. And she was very clumsy as a toddler. I always thought it was just because I laughed. When she was little, she was thick. I mean, she was just solid. We called her a bull in a china shop all the time because she was just thick and she ran into everything and she didn't watch where she was going. But now I think that was also a part of just the start of brain damage that we didn't know was happening, which was, she looks like a cute, silly toddler that's very hyperactive, but it was very much a sign of the brain damage.
I'm so sorry to hear that. Now, it's true that Sanfilippo can be genetically passed from parents to children during conception. So, if both genetic parents of a child are carriers of of the syndrome, with each pregnancy, they have a 25% chance of having a child with Sanfilippo syndrome, a 50% chance of having a child who is not affected but is a carrier, and a 25% chance of having a child who is neither affected nor a carrier. So, it's really a toss up. Now, interestingly, you have an older daughter with no disability. Is she a carrier, and are you and your husband both carriers?
So, my husband and I are both carriers, and my oldest daughter, we do not know yet. We have not had her tested, but we will. Um, Insurance did not want to cover it when she was younger. So, for Haidyn, they also didn't cover it, and we paid like $6,000
Oh my
to,
God.
yeah, because they deemed it unnecessary. And that's not even trying to talk bad about insurance, but it is frustrating for parents when for us it was deemed unnecessary. So we had to pay cash to choose the cheapest option. And it was very much necessary because we found out she has, a fatal genetically inherited disease. So we are waiting on my oldest, but we do want to have her tested so she can know for her future um, if there's a chance that she could pass it to her children if she has children.
Oof, so many things to consider. So many
Yes.
things. You are one warrior. Now, physical characteristics, nervous system symptoms, gastrointestinal symptoms, musculoskeletal symptoms, ear, nose, and throat symptoms. Your
Mhm.
expenses must be through the roof, all while fundraising to find the cure. What is your biggest stress at the moment? And do you worry about your older daughter being emotionally affected?
So biggest stress at the moment. That's a funny one. I don't know. I feel like I have a big jar full of stress, and it just depends on which piece of candy I pull out every day to see what is stressing me out more. Um, Medical bills are always stressful because Haidyn sees almost every kind of specialist, it feels like, and she's got routine procedures. And while we do have insurance, we make too much on paper to be approved for like government assistance of any kind
Right.
through the state. So we are thankful for our insurance, but it's still very expensive every year. Um, and I would say, financially is stressful. Just being able to prioritize time, like you stated, between having a child that is sick and that has a disability and all of her needs, and then having an older child and trying to give her a normal childhood and trying to allow, or not allow, but keep all of this from traumatizing her the best way that we can, because she does have a sister with a terminal illness and she handles it very, very well. I mean, from what I see on the outside, she's very strong, but and I don't want to speak for her too much, but just as her mother, I think sometimes she pours that anxiety and that stress and that grief into everything else she does. She's very much a perfectionist, and I'm so proud of her. I mean, she works so hard at everything she does, but she's also, I know no one that is harder on herself than my oldest child. I'm always like, you don't have this much pressure on you from us. You know that, right? Like, we just want you to do stuff because you enjoy it and you're doing your best. And so, yeah, I think she does struggle, but I just think that, other people may not notice how it affects her because
Oh,
she
well,
pulls.
I'm sure it does affect her, but, like, even as a teenager, seeing her little sister, go through this, seeing her mom struggle, seeing,
Mhm.
the ecosystem, it definitely takes a toll, but she puts on a brave, big smile, and I see you on social media, and she's just an incredible soul, so big shout out to Sissy.
Thank
Now,
you.
you deal with a ton of nasty comments on social media. I've personally read them from people who are just
Yeah.
ignorant and uneducated and lack empathy. What
Mhm.
stigmas do you wish to demystify when it comes to Sanfilippo syndrome?
Ooh, there's a lot. I guess, I one thing that I have struggled explaining to other people is like talking about my oldest daughter, that by her caring for her sister does not mean that she is forced to, or that she is playing a caregiver role to her disabled sibling, or that we don't have a healthy family dynamic. And I don't say that to brag or to boast or to look good on camera. I am extremely thankful that my husband, my oldest, and Haidyn, we all have a very healthy, very open and loving family dynamic. And we are super fortunate because I know how rare that is, especially in families that have children with disabilities or terminal illnesses. A lot of marriages don't make it, let alone how that affects the children in the process. So I would say that's one stigma, is that you can have a healthy family and have a teenager that's gifted and does all the things, and you can have a child on the complete opposite end that is disabled and very sick and requires a lot of care. And I'm just lucky that my oldest understands all of that, and we do our best to make time. My husband and I are constantly doing different things for both girls and taking turns staying home with one so the other can be with my oldest, and we take Haidyn to everything that we can for her sister. Um,
I see that. I see you on social media with the dogs and her service animals, and you're camping or glamping, or dad's
mhm.
taking her, in the water. Now, is Hayden aware of her condition? I mean, obviously not to a certain extent, but do you feel she's suffering? And what advice do you have to families receiving a Sanfilippo diagnosis?
So I would not say Haidyn is aware of what's happening. I don't know to the extent of how much she could have understood as a younger child, especially that she was losing skills. I think she had an idea, like there was some awareness that there were things that she was once able to do that she's no longer able to do, because we did go through some really difficult emotional times, and like losing speech. I'm sure in a way she could understand, like, okay, mom is not able to figure out what I'm trying to tell her. And because I couldn't understand, she was losing speech, but I know she was very much still trying to tell me something she used to be able to tell me. Um, but fortunately, no, I know that she never reached cognitive level to be able to understand what autism was when she was diagnosed with it. So I know she never understood Sanfilippo syndrome, or, us talking about it. And
Right.
it's very bittersweet because that's one thing I am oddly thankful for, is that she has no idea, because to me, I feel like it would be even harder to try to explain to her what's happening to her body.
Oh, yeah, without a doubt. Sometimes God only gives you, as much as you can handle for a reason.
Yeah.
Now, talk to me about Hayden's Extraordinary Garden book. You are now an author, and what is your mission with the book? Congratulations.
Thank you. I decided to write the book because I've had several people ask me, well, more than several. I've had people in my personal life and as well as followers and friends on social media asking about how to talk to their children about something like Sanfilippo syndrome. And I've even had like my sister or my sister-in-law that have my nieces and nephews talking to me about, how they talk to their kids about their cousin Haidyn and how she's sick. And it's just a really difficult conversation that usually ends pretty quickly because the kids begin to ask really difficult questions that can make you emotional as a parent. And I just decided to write a children's book because I figured if I could come up with a way that wasn't too informative, to scare the children because you don't really want to talk about anything too terminal, to a little kid because it can be scary. So I just tried to think of ways to explain how Haidyn's body works differently and how she lacks certain things that most of us have. And that's what causes her to lose these skills. But it doesn't mean that you can't be her friend or that you have to be scared of her or that this is going to happen to you. It just means
Right.
that her body works differently.
Wow, you are one strong lady, my dear, one strong lady. We are out of time. I want to thank you so much for coming on. Anything that we could do to help, we will. We'll send tons and tons of listeners your way and people checking out your Instagram page. But you are amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. That was our disability awareness segment brought to you by ogpay.com. That was the incredible Carrie Fowler, medical mama, author, and influencer advocating for her daughter Haidyn, currently diagnosed with the terminal genetic disorder Sanfilippo Syndrome. You can check her out on the gram at Haidyn's Hope, and that's Haidyn with a Y. They're currently actively fundraising. Please make sure that you're being empathetic when you're checking out her page and keep all negative comments to yourself. If you have nothing nice to say, don't say it at all. You're listening to A Moment of Zen right here on 710 WOR, the voice of New York, iHeartRadio. We'll be right back after this.
A Moment of Zen is brought to you by Caldwell Soames Incorporated, investing globally in transformative businesses like Original Digital Corporation, or ODC. ODC develops advanced consumer and commercial fintech solutions such as OGPay, which will transform the way you manage your money. From sending and receiving money globally for free, paying for goods and services in person and online, pay bills, buy and sell digital currencies, all while earning interest. OGPay is easy to set up, FDIC insured, and your information is secured. Check out ogpay.com.